Good morning. Welcome to Humanity Meets Business, Business Therapy with Christine Salvo. Super excited to have our guest today. Xandra Haas has been on once before, and if you had not listened to her episode, I suggest you go back and listen to it soon. Xandra Hawes is a contemplative psychotherapist and psychic medium on a mission to help you connect with your highest self. She is the creator of Soul Essence Wellness Center, an online energy medicine school where she helps others tap into their intuition, develop a deeper sense of embodied trust, and exist from a place of spirit fullness. Xandra weaves psychology, spirituality, and energy healing into all facets of her work to help people heal their mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Check out Xandra's free podcast, available on all major streaming platforms, and her YouTube videos under Soul Essence Wellness Center. Or check out her website for more information on working with her, soulessencewellnesscenter.com. Happy to have you back and super excited about our topic tonight. You know, we're both psychotherapists and work with energy and things like that, but we do it in, you know, different parts of the world, and I'm sure we have different perspectives, philosophies, and kind of ways of doing that. But, you know, our pre-talk before the show, we were talking about, you know, what we're both noticing in our practices, and Xandra just came out with a great topic. You want to talk about it?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And I think you did amazing at introducing it. There are so many big words. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. I have such an amazing team of people that help me write certain things. And they're like, you need to use smaller words, but I'm still in love with all the big ones. So thanks for putting them all in there.
I promise I can read. You wouldn't know it.
Oh my God. I love it. Oh man. Well, I loved our pre-talk, just kind of talking about, like you said, what we're seeing in practice and things like that. And I think across the board in so many different areas of life, there's this sort of collective fatigue that's sort of happening around how do we sort of trust moving forward, right? Are things going to be okay? And I think it's caught up a little bit in compassion fatigue. And so a lot of different career industries, people are feeling that, especially when they're working with folks in a lot of the healthcare industry and even the even more of the social kind of sales industry too, of trying to connect with people. And I think there's so much going on. And so a lot having to do with compassion fatigue is also working with doubt, because when we're fatigued and it's feeling hard to have compassion for other people or for ourselves, it brings up this kind of existentialness and lack of self-trust and doubt. So very big topics that we can both speak on and bring a lot to, but it's something I'm noticing in a lot of folks. And sometimes it's hard for people to tell if they're having compassion fatigue because they feel like it's something they're doing wrong, right? Or they have some really difficult symptoms around it.
Oh, yeah. Well, and as you said before, you know, the compassion piece, right? Like, what's compassion? It's like caring for others. I'm sorry you're going through this, right? And so if you're in the medical profession and you're watching, you know, a lot of the tragic things that they're seeing, you're caring and you're caring and you're pouring out and you're pouring out and you're pouring out and pouring out. But often, you know, so many of us that are healers or energy givers don't necessarily have people that pour into us. And eventually you start to kind of drain out a little bit. How would you kind of describe compassion fatigue?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people are familiar with like burnout, right? In a lot of ways where it's like, you're not necessarily in it. But I think compassion fatigue in a lot of ways is where we sort of stop seeing people for who they really are and for who we really are. There's this sense of, I don't have enough energy sort of in me to really be able to reach and see the other person. Because I really think compassion is about seeing people regardless of sometimes their actions, right? It's like, I know that person is a good person, even though this action, right, isn't good. And so it's
Right.
it's like, I don't have the space to be able to have more care, like you said, towards other people. And whenever that's happening, I always think of it as like almost like a water fountain. It's like a lot of water's going out of the fountain, but not enough is going in. And so you can't give if you're not giving to yourself. It's that sort of cycle. And so compassion fatigue is like, there's not enough water going in to be able to offer to other people. And then if we stay in that space where we keep pushing and trying to give over and over, right? The wheels of the machine, the whole thing breaks down. It no longer works anymore, right? So I think about compassion fatigue in that way, but I'm curious what you sort of think of too, like around the suffering sort of in compassion fatigue, or like how people deal with it in a way, or how.
Well, you know, I can speak to personal experience. I've definitely in my think I'm in 11 years of practice now. There's been waves.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely been waves for me. Actually, it's more than 11, but I don't know. I can't keep track. So there's been times, and I know because I recognize my signs and symptoms, and typically my signs and symptoms, personally being a therapist full time, is kind of a little more short-tempered with people, maybe not going the long way, maybe wanting to brush past certain things because, I just don't really have the energy for it. And then also a lack of energy when I come home for my own family. And that was a boundary I had to set early on because I wasn't quite prepared for that. They talk about burnout and things in grad school, but I wasn't quite prepared for this idea that I'm going to give all of my energy all day and I may not have much left when I get home. And I noticed, gosh, my kids were small and I would come home kind of like just spent. And I had to draw this line with myself of my family, as much as I love my work and my clients, my family's my family, especially my children, right? Those are people that came from me and expect and need me, right? More than my hourly people. So really learning to manage my energy, know when it's time to take a break. And shortly after that, I started scheduling long weekends, decent long vacations about every few months, just to make sure. I'm also a big fan of retreats and spiritual work for myself. So it's not unlike me to take 40 hours, to take a course that's 5 days, 10 hours a day or something like that, and just dump my cup, come back fresh, bouncy, ready to go, full of energy, new ideas, and hit it. But recognizing our own cycles and what that looks like. And a lot of times I see this with caregivers too. So if you have elderly parents or if you have children with special needs, things like that, the similar symptoms, like I'm just really not patient, I just don't really have that extra to be like, wow, you're in pain, or you just don't know better, or you're, like you said before, just kind of like the ability not to see them anymore and kind of almost having that cloudy vision on. And for me, it shows up as grumpiness.
Right. And you're pointing to something big too around how compassion fatigue has so much to do with self-care. And I feel like self-care is such a buzzword in a way, right? Like just caring for the self, but it looks so different, right? Depending on the person. For you, it's space. For you, it's like connecting in with your sort of spiritual essence, right? In a way of like, how do I go back in and kind of come into the cave of myself and kind of sit with myself so that I can go back out into the world? It's that balance, right? That you speak of. Yeah. And there's something big you're saying too about like, there's so many folks that are in a caregiver sort of position too, of like having to care about other people or support other people. Even, when you go out to eat, someone is trying to care for you, right? They're delivering you things, they're helping you things, they're showing you care. You're ordering nourishment. So even when you go out to a restaurant, you have someone that is trying to give you sort of compassionate help, sort of in a way, right? So it's like, I sort of think about when all these people that are trying to care for other people focus on others without practicing that self-care, even like destructive or difficult behaviors can kind of come through, or apathy, or isolation, or some of that sort of stuff coming through. And I guess for me too, when I don't know, when I have like clients, and again, I've done this myself too, just like you, around like if I don't have that space and time to really root into myself, I find the same thing, the grumpiness. Sometimes everything feels kind of murky. It's hard to make a decision, right? Everything's just kind of a 5 in my life. I'm like, why am I not excited for this? Why am I not this? It's sort of like losing vision on things because my energy field is so spread out and there's too much energy sort of flowing outward. So how to kind of come back in. And I think, again, and maybe it's just the folks that I see, but I work with a lot of people that are sensitive or empaths or intuitive. And so they're extra sensitive to that energy. And so when you're that kind of person, you have to do even more work to maintain your own sort of energetic boundaries too,
Absolutely. And when kind of teaching like the work-life balance or the self-care, one of the first things I like to ask people is, are you taking your breaks and are you taking your lunch break? And you'd be surprised how many people say no. They donate their time. They're eating at their desk. And I'm like, drive to the park and sit and stare at the trees and eat in your car. If, I'm a big fan of movement, so move your body if you can. But if it's too cold but so many people are giving up just these spaces in time that could be nourishing throughout the day to maintain energy.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
guilty of it early on. It would be like I see clients all morning and then it's like, oh, well, I don't want to be bogged down with notes. I'll do my lunch on my lunch break and then I'll see clients all afternoon. And it's not perfect. I'm not going to say I have perfect work-life balance, but I have more awareness now. But I really feel like that plays into the compassion fatigue too, of are you
Mm-hmm.
getting daily breaks? So we all like
Yeah.
our big break called the vacation or things like that. But it's so important to have those micro breaks too, the ones in between the day, to take the 5 minutes to meditate, to go for the walk, to whatever the case is, hit the gym on your lunch break. What do you kind of recommend for that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of like the movement and things like that. And similarly, if I'm working with someone and they're like, yeah, I'm not motivated, right? Or I feel like I need a break or I need to stop. And depending on their work, if I can tell that they're pouring a lot of time into other people and not in themselves, I'm like, okay, well, let's break down your day. Right. This is a pie chart of you. So let's just break this down and we're going to put eating, sleeping, work, right? Like some of these basic sort of things. And let's create a pie chart that shows how many hours or minutes you're giving to each of those things. And so we literally end up making a pie chart of like, okay, out of the 24 hours, how many of those are going to sleeping? How many of those are going to eating, right? Or drinking water? And most of the time, the pie chart, right, is just swollen in one sort of area. There really isn't balance. And I use different colors and things. And so you can really see in 24 hours, how are you using your time? And if there's time that people don't know about and it's kind of murky, then I'm like, okay, well, let's sort of break down. And I noticed a lot of people falling into kind of compassion fatigue. They're trying to kind of avoid or kind of move away from the fatigue by doing self-care, but sometimes the self-care isn't actually self-care. It's more like avoidance, which I don't want to push that down, right? Like that's a wisdom in a way if I'm trying to move away from this, but whether or not it's actually working is questionable,
Mm-hmm.
of like, yeah, I get home from my day and I do this and then, I'm on Instagram for 3 hours. I'll be like, well, what are you doing after? And I'm like, that's not bad, but are you getting joy out of it? Like, are you
Right.
finding yourself refreshed? Are you finding joy? Or do you find yourself just kind of feeling a little bit less, on edge, but you're still at a 6? Cause I don't know if that's the best strategy. Right. So it's like how to really break someone's day up in this sort of pie chart way. And if there's certain self-care, going in even more and saying, is it actually working? Like if we're honest with ourselves here, and if it's not working, what's the resistance to doing something different?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I love the pie chart. Oh man. So I actually really want to challenge our listeners right now before we go any further of, take 5 minutes if you can allow yourself to take 5 minutes because you probably have, a terrible looking pie chart. But really do what Xandra said here, which is break down your day and be honest. We all like to look so productive, because we have such a productive, society and that's what's
Mhm.
valued and blah blah blah. But really be honest with yourself, which is like if you're spending 5 hours a night watching TV and scrolling your social media accounts, but you're behind on all these different areas, you don't feel in shape, you're not eating healthy, you're not doing the basic needs that are really vital for your life force energy, for you to feel good about yourself, and even just a confidence thing, right? Then I love your question of kind of like, is this bringing me joy? Like
Mhm.
I can just sit and numb out and watch TV, which like you said, nothing's wrong with that specifically.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
but if we're looking at an excess of 20, 30, 40 hours a week, that might be a problem because you're not going to be able to maintain watching every episode and have all the other things that you want and crave in your life.
Mhm. Mhm. Totally. And it's so funny because the pie chart piece, I ended up working with someone and the television, they're like, oh, my TV watching, my TV watching. They always say that, but it's a big resource for them. And I was like, it doesn't have to be bad. I was like, do you feel available or like kind of open enough to share with me what you're watching? We don't have to, but they were like, oh yeah. And they listed everything they were watching. And I was like, everything that you're going towards has a wisdom in it. So if you're looking to television and there's certain things that you're watching, what kind of medicine are you trying to bring into your life that you're dependent on the TV for? And it was funny because everything they were watching had to do with comedy and laughter. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
you actually want joy and laughter and play to break up the seriousness of your day. This is a huge signal, right? This is actually a breadcrumb of this is the medicine you're wanting. Do you know how to bring that into your life besides just depending on watching someone else's life be funny? Right.
Right.
So I think sometimes even if we're going into those things, it's like, okay, this is a wisdom. I'm obviously looking for something to meet me. Can I look at it objectively and say, what kind of genre is this? Like, what am I going to? What am I really needing for my day? Because even our quote unquote bad habits are huge metaphors for what we're actually wanting more of in our lives, right? It's like kind of obscure in that way. But yeah, it was hilarious to watch that,
You
to
know
kind of be
what?
like laughter. Yeah.
Elaborate on the destructive being medicine, because I really love your take on that.
And maybe this is more of a Buddhist sort of piece, my degrees in contemplative psychotherapy. And even before that, I was studying Buddhism because I grew up with such this like household of perfection, Midwest, like very kind of Germanic, lots of rules. And it kind of comes with a lot of like, this is right and this is wrong. And so sometimes it becomes this, you're either doing it right or, you're sabotaging or you're doing it bad. And that never actually felt accurate to me. And so when I started studying sort of Buddhism and started looking at like, what's the wisdom inside what we're doing? Because even if we're not fully deciding to do the best thing for ourselves, we're still trying to heal ourselves. Like we're still trying to move away from discomfort in us by reaching out for something else. So it's like, even if we decide to reach out and we overeat, there's a part of us, right, that's longing for this sense of nourishment. There's something that wants grounding. It wants weight. We want to feel weighted down. So it's like, oh, I need something to root me in. I'm leaning into these things, even though they may not seem like they're serving me. There's a wisdom and there's something that I'm leaning into here. So yeah, I like to, when I'm sort of down on myself or saying like, oh, I shouldn't have done this, I'm like, okay, well, what's the medicine in it? What's the underlying thing that it's sort of giving me, right? Or even if we decide we're listening to music and we're like, oh, I seem to listen to all the sad songs. And it's like, okay, well, what do those sad songs give you? And it's like, well, it opens my heart, right? I cry. And I'm like, oh, you want to feel connection to yourself and your heart. You're trying to move energy. You're trying to let go of something. And so even though the sad songs aren't making you happier, it's helping you connect with that space. And that's what you actually need. Right. So it's like these destructive things have so much wisdom if we're willing to not shame ourselves as the first thing for them, you know?
Yeah, that's a really great perspective. That's such a gentler approach. And, it's kind of fun being people that somewhat teach gentleness in a world that's like, what's that? What do you mean it's okay for me to feel these things or do these things? So kind of going back into our topic here of that compassion fatigue, another thing I really wanted to hit on, because you brought it up and it was like, wow, this is beautiful, was doubt and joy.
Totally. Those are big ones. And I think people think they're like on different spectrums somehow, that doubt is completely opposite of joy. And I think they're just part of the same coin. They're part of the kind of the same process. Trying to think, there's a model that I have. And a lot of times I have this like silly whiteboard in my office where I take out markers and I put the most awful drawings on them. I always warn people, I'm like, it's not going to be cute. So just hang in there with me. But one thing that I think is that sometimes I use the model that in order to make a change, there are 3 different types of awareness. And a lot of times we need all 3 in order to actually get to the goal. And the first thing we do is we become pain aware of like, wow, I'm feeling pain, and you sit in it and you feel it. You're just in that kind of space where you're really in the muck. And then the second part is when you're like, okay, I'm done just feeling this. How am I feeling it or why? You become problem aware. And then the next part is like, okay, I understand the muck. I understand why it's happening and how. Am I ready to do something different? Right. So it's this process. And if people jump from like pain aware to solution aware, they skip that middle where they're kind of looking at the problem. That's how marketing gets you, right? It's like, do you not like your body? Here, buy this gym membership. And you're like, I don't like my body. I'm going to buy this gym membership and go every day for 2 weeks and then never freaking go to the gym again. Right. Because you didn't actually sit in the middle part of why and how is this happening? So you just go, I hate the pain. And so you go into solution. So I bring up that model, those 3 sort of pieces, because doubt is the pain. Doubt is that first part, and joy is actually the solution. So it's like, doubt is actually the first step to making a change. When doubt comes up, it says, I don't trust this, right? And so compassion fatigue says, I don't trust this. I don't trust this, kind of ground for myself. Like, I don't trust that this is the right thing I should be doing. Maybe I don't trust myself. There's doubt around how to go through it, but that's actually making a change because you're deciding, instead of being offline to it, you're experiencing the feeling. It's like a thorn. It's coming up as you're pulling it out. And so doubt is the first step to change. It's the pain part. And then you start saying, why or how am I doubting myself? Or, where did this come from? Right? Because so much of our doubt is actually old. It's not really in present time. It's stories. And then the solution becomes, oh my gosh, what am I going to do to really move from a place of doubt into joy? Because the joy grows out of doubt, basically. And so I always see, if someone's doubting, I'm like, great, you're on the path. You are like a third of the way there. And they look at me like I'm insane. I'm like, this is so great. Your confusion is so close to the wisdom, because the more confused you are, the more you're opening to the potential, and the more the wisdom is actually coming towards you. If you weren't on the path, you wouldn't be even thinking about this, right? You wouldn't be changing because it wouldn't bother you yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't bother you yet. I love that. I love that. So really kind of looking at, staying back with the compassion fatigue, because this all ties together really well, which is when you're feeling, even doubt in what you're doing, like you said earlier, before we started this episode, so many people are struggling with business decisions, right? Do I want to stay in this career? What is my passion? I'm having doubt about this. I'm having doubt about that. And even if you are in compassion fatigue, it is okay to make change there too. Sometimes when we're helpers and we're healers and we have these roles, we don't think we have permission to do something else. I was talking to a therapist friend yesterday, and we're just laughing, and making fun of ourselves and the stress of our jobs at times. And we're both like, you may just find us someday being like, world's greatest sandwich artist. just something completely unrelated. And it's okay to find those balances. You don't have to be on all the time. It is okay to kind of lose yourself in something else. But I think part of our discussion today is really trying to help lead you to that place of knowing that it's okay to feel bad. There's a process here for change. And joy is ultimately that goal, right? And if you're not feeling joy, pay attention. This isn't something to be ignored, pushed down, avoided. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the awesome clients that I have, he's grown a lot, and he always wears this hat that says "Embrace Discomfort" when we're on our Zoom calls, and I just love it because it's almost like Nike. It's like, just do it, and it's like, embrace discomfort.
Yeah.
I really love it. It's becoming the new slogan, like of working on yourself. But yeah, there's something important around. I think sometimes I laugh because it feels like change and transformation gets really glamorized, right? Like the whole butterfly. And I'm just like, well, in order for a caterpillar to become a butterfly, it crawls into this like kind of gross, like suffocating dark space. And like, it's probably really hot in there. It probably can't breathe very well. Like, like in order for it to become this sort of butterfly, it has to embrace discomfort. It actually has to kind of go underground in the dark. And I think when we're having a lot of doubt or we don't have a direction, it feels really dark. We don't feel inspired, but that's sort of where things take place. Like even roots grow in the dark, right? So much of the tree starts in the dark because this is the collection period. It's the sort of period where it's like, okay, I'm experiencing doubt about this. Okay, I need to feel that emotion in myself and really connect with myself and say, what do I need here? If I'm not trusting myself or there's doubt about what I should do, is there another solution, right? And I should be allowed to be in joy. So do I need to change my values, right? Am I really in my purpose? Because again, doubt, and if you're experiencing doubt in something you're doing, it's because you ultimately want to feel joy. So something is stopping you and saying, this is not going to lead to joy. So again, it's like this kind of hand going up and saying, we got to change something here in order for us to get to joy. And so when you experience doubt, it's like something needs healing here. So it's this beautiful, actually, first step, if we can think of it like that. I think you're right. Our society kind of has this push productive, again, this everything's a butterfly without the transformation, right? Everything's just like that. And I'm like, that's a lie. I don't know who told you that. I don't know if the Nike commercial made you think that, but that's not true.
No, and that's really why I love having these conversations of kind of breaking it down. And that's even why I wanted to talk about my own experience of compassion fatigue and burnout throughout my career. And just having that open, honest conversation of, yes, I'm a therapist. Yes, I do this for a living. It's my passion. It's my purpose. I don't ever want to stop. And if I don't have proper self-care, it trickles downhill too. Mm-hmm. When I have really good self-care, everyone wins. When I have really poor self-care, everyone doesn't win. So recognizing, that if you are a professional, if you have lots of letters behind your name, if you are a perfectionist or a high achiever, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's okay. For our doctors out there, our EMTs, our nurses, all these people that are just giving their all every single day, it's okay. It's okay to take your breaks. It's okay to take care of yourself. And in fact, please do. Everybody wins. Everybody gets more when we're all nourished. What do you think about that, Xandra?
Oh man. Yeah. My brain always goes to I think you know this too, this balance between sort of like more of the intellectual clinical, and then it goes over into kind of the nature and the spiritual piece. And so as you were talking about that, my one brain part was agreeing, and then another part was thinking about kind of on the nature sort of spiritual end. I was this past summer, I ended up going out kind of just to like an open air sort of music festival, and I was camping, and I went kind of for a walk afterwards. It got done at like 10 o'clock, and I was walking through the trees, and I sat at the base of this massive tree, and it occurred to me, I was like, wow, everything is rooting for us, right? Like literally rooting, like plant wise, but like rooting for us. Every single bite of food you put in your mouth is trying to nourish you. The water, the earth pushing up under your feet, the gravity pushing you down. And every single person, right? Maybe even if you didn't have a great experience with someone in life, I imagine that if you were to go up and say, hey, even despite what happened with this person, would you still root them on? Do you still hope that good things happen for them? I think most people would say yes, right? So there's so much in our lives, people around us that are rooting for us and wanting us to be nourished and cared for. And sometimes it's sad when there's this sense of everything around us is rooting for us and knows that we deserve that space that we're talking about. And somehow we get mixed up and feel like we don't deserve that space. And then therefore compassion fatigue happens because we're giving so much and not nourishing ourselves. And so it's so sweet that when we can actually tap in to the goodness around us that's actually there, how many people want us to do well, because we're not separate on a higher level. We all impact one another. So yeah, I'm totally agreeing with what you're saying and sort of thinking about it in like a wooey, more spiritual way too, of how everything is rooting down and also rooting up for us simultaneously.
Awesome. I love it. And that's why I was like, I can't wait to have Sandra back.
And I was like, yay.
So our conversations are always so rich and so depthy. And I really appreciate this topic today. And I really hope that our listeners get a lot out of it. So, once again, I know I read it in the bio, but it'll probably come better for you. For our listeners, if they want to find you or learn more, how can they find it? Where would they look?
Oh, definitely. The easiest way to contact is my website, which is soulessencewellnesscenter.com. I have a podcast on, all the major streaming platforms. I have a social media account that I should use, more, but that's kind of the way that I think a lot of people are kind of searching for folks. So I've got the Instagrams of the world and the Facebooks just under Soul Essence Wellness as well. So, and I do lots of free calls for people as well, sometimes that are looking for resources around these sorts of things. So if there's a listening moment where you're like, how do I find out more around compassion fatigue? I have different lists of symptoms and things that you can also look them up to see, like, is this actually happening for me? So you can better figure out what you need care for wise too. So people are welcome to reach out if they're trying to figure out if they fall into this category and how to move forward with it too. So
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being back on the show and having such a rich, deep conversation with me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be back.
I know. This has been Humanity Meets Business, Business Therapy with Christine Salvo, licensed marriage and family therapist, advanced certified mediator, and master practitioner in NLP and hypnosis. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day. Good morning. Welcome to Humanity Meets Business, Business Therapy with Christine.